So what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about the EANS program, specifically about its purpose, and give you an overview of the program. We'll talk about applicant eligibility, and we'll talk about responsibilities of the applicant versus those of the Kentucky Department of Education, and we'll talk about application requirements in the submission process. We will do a overview of the application at the end. What I plan to do today is go through the presentation first. We're going to stop at the end of the presentation and just take a look for additional questions we may need to answer verbally, and take a look at some resources. Take a look at a place where if you need additional clarification, or you have just general questions, that you can lodge those questions. We have a specific email box set up for that. So that would be the best method for you to ensure that your questions are directed to the right person. So just to give you some background about the EANS program, it was passed as a part of the second round of the Governor's Emergency Education Relief, and that's referred to commonly as GEAR funding. It provides reimbursement or services to eligible non-public schools impacted by COVID-19. I think it's very important to observe the last few words in that sentence. The impact of COVID-19, you will have to make some connections in your application to what you are requesting, either services, assistance, or reimbursement, to the impacts that your non-public or homeschool has incurred. Just want to say that we'll talk a little bit more about reimbursement, which is a little bit different than for those of you that know federal programs that work with them commonly. Generally, we are not allowed to do reimbursements, but under this program, reimbursements are allowed. We have approximately $40 million available to carry out services and provide assistance or reimbursements. That's quite a bit of money. You'll see in the original communication, we set some per pupil limits, and we'll talk about those at the bottom, but those are set to ensure that we can meet everybody's needs based on the amount of money we've been appropriated. Applicants, again, may apply for assistance and reimbursement as defined by statute. We'll talk about allowable costs in just a few minutes. Really allowable cost categories, and those will be very useful in planning. Funds except for reimbursements, if you request services in the future and you want us to administer those services, we would not provide you funds for those services. But for example, if you wanted tutoring for a group of students, and you ask us to reimburse, or you ask us to administer instead of reimburse those services, we would not provide funds directly to you for those types of services. So services are going to be funded tentatively on the following per pupil amounts, and those are $400 for each student enrolled, and then an additional $250 for each low-income student enrolled. I think you'll find that in our communication that we sent out. You'll find that on our webpage, and those are important amounts for you to adhere to in your planning. So the types of assistance available are defined in statute, and we pulled these directly out of statute. It's very similar to what private schools could have done under ESSER in round one of the CARES Act. So that was the first round of emergency assistance that was sent to districts, and districts actually carried out those services for private schools. Again, that's a little different from this time because the state has been charged with administering those services under this round of CARES funding. So really, there's a wide range of things that non-publics can request assistance or reimbursements for, including things such as supplies for sanitation and disinfection to clean school facilities, personal protective equipment, improving ventilation systems, including windows or portable air purification systems, training and PD for staff about sanitation and the use of personal protective equipment, physical barriers, things of that nature to promote social distancing, other materials, supplies, or equipment recommended by the CDC for reopening and operation of school facilities, particularly around maintaining health and safety. CDC does provide some guidance if you search for. I searched yesterday just for CDC and schools, just for those terms, and they provide some pretty in-depth guidance around what their recommendations are. Expanding capacity to administer coronavirus testing to ensure that the spread of the virus is suppressed. Additionally, educational technology is an allowable cost. The redevelopment of instructional plans for remote or hybrid learning, or to address learning loss. We have had a few questions about that. Leasing sites or spaces to ensure social distancing, reasonable transportation costs, initiating and maintaining education and support services or assistance for remote or hybrid learning or to address learning loss, and then reimbursement for any of those expenses that occurred all the way back to the date of the emergency as declared by the president, which was March 13th, 2020. I want to make sure that everybody understands that reimbursement for future services is also an allowable cost. So, for example, if you have plans to purchase technology or implement a tutoring program, in the future, those costs can be reimbursed as well. There will be some things when it comes to reimbursement that we ask for, which may include things like detailed receipts or purchase orders. We are required to collect those types of things to ensure that we are properly reimbursing non-public and home schools. Okay, so the U.S. Department has issued guidance, which we referenced in our communications and on our EANS page. There are certain things that are not allowed to be reimbursed. So those particular items are listed here. One thing I want to make sure that everybody knows, we'll talk about that in just a few minutes, that any expenses reimbursed through a loan guaranteed through the payroll protection program prior to December 27th, 2020 are not allowed to be reimbursed. In other words, you cannot claim double reimbursement for things that you have already received reimbursement for or that you have received a loan for. So there are a few things that cannot be reimbursed. Again, this particular list should be used in your planning for your application. We highly recommend that you take a look at all of the resources that we have provided, including guidance, our communications, our EANS page, while you are planning your application. On the EANS page and in our communication, we have provided a hard copy of the application for you to take a look at for planning, and we highly recommend using that as well for planning, because our application will be open for only a short period of time. Applicant eligibility. So any non-public or homeschool wishing to apply must meet all of the following criteria. They have to serve students in grades between K to 12. So that doesn't mean your school has to have students in all of those grades, but those grades are, a requirement for being served. So non-public preschools that are standalone preschools are not eligible to apply. We talked with the U.S. Department of Education particularly about that provision. And what they told us was a non-public preschool that is part of an elementary school could be served as part of that elementary school's program, but a standalone non-public preschool would not be eligible to apply as well as an entity in itself. The non-public school must be nonprofit. So in Kentucky, homeschools are considered to be nonprofit by nature, so long as they are not charging tuition or fees for their services. We do have some homeschools that take in kids from the surrounding area and charge a fee. In order to be eligible to apply, that particular type of school would have to have nonprofit certification by the state. The school must be accredited, licensed, or otherwise operate in accordance with state law. In Kentucky, which we are different from many states surrounding us, non-public schools are approved to operate within Kentucky without accreditation, licensure, or certification. So really, that otherwise operate in accordance with state law is the statement or the clause that applies there. The school must have been in existence prior to March 13th, 2020. That is the date the president declared the national emergency due to COVID-19. So any non-public school that came in existence on March 13th or later would not be able to apply. And the non-public school must not have applied and will not apply and receive a loan under the Small Business Administration's Paycheck Protection Program that is made on or after December 27th. So I want to talk a little bit about applicant responsibilities. So the applicant must complete an application. So the application is going to include some contact information, a signed certification, basically saying that the information submitted is correct and accurate, some assurances. You will have to provide total student enrollment and low income data. The application provides some additional information on what type of low income data would be acceptable. So does the U.S. Department of Education's guidance. You will have to provide some information about participation in the federal payroll protection program prior to December 27th, 2020. If you participated in that, we'll ask you if you participated in that and how much you received according to that particular program. And finally, you will have to submit a W-9 and an easy vendor application. Thelma or Karen, do you want to talk a little bit about the W-9 and easy vendor application?
Sure, I'll be glad to. Good morning. My name is Karen Worth, and as David said, I'm with the department as the director in the budget and financial management area. So the vendor easy form that will be required with your application really just gives us the opportunity to set you up as a vendor within our financial system. So we have a system at the state that allows us to make payments and reimbursements to vendors. And so we need to get you guys set up as vendors so that if you do send us an invoice for reimbursement, then we're able to have a payment mechanism to actually pay you. So it's a pretty easy form to fill out. We'll just need it's pretty self-explanatory. And then if you could also send your W-9 as well, and that will help us get you established and set up in our financial system as a vendor. One thing that we are going to ask is that process takes a little bit of time. It requires work internally at KDE and also requires some external approvals. So we would recommend that when you receive the application and the easy form and that you go ahead and complete that and send that on in to us so that we can go ahead and get a start on getting everyone registered and get a vendor number. Thelma, did you want to add anything? David, I think that's it. We'll address any questions as they come up.
Okay, and Matthew, we do have specific links to those particular forms on our EANS webpage, correct?
Yes, that's correct. On the EANS webpage, you'll see all of the materials that you need to apply, including the W-9 and the Easy Vendor application.
Okay, great. In the application continued, we will ask you to define the impact of COVID-19, and that is going to be important because the assistance or reimbursements that you ask for will have to be connected to that particular impact. So we need to see some linear connection there between the impact and the things that you are requesting. We'll ask you about participation under the first round of the Coronavirus Response and Relief Act or the CARES Act, particularly if you participated by obtaining services through a school district and the approximate amount of those services. You may need to reach out to the school district if you did receive those services to do some research and figure out how much you did receive in services total. You will have to define the reimbursement or the services requested, the needs the request will meet. Again, that's a connection to the impacts of COVID-19 in the amount requested for each. So essentially you will be asked to fill out a detailed budget within your application. So some special considerations for applicants. We are on a very tight timeline set by the statute. Once we receive applications, we have 30 days to either approve or deny those applications. And we also have to have funding obligated for services within 6 months. So we won't have initially a lot of time to go back and forth with non-public schools to make corrections on their applications. So we had to set some standards up front. So first of all, applications that fail to provide all required information, including the completion of each application section, will be deemed non-responsive and funding will not be provided in that case. The per pupil amounts and the submission of an application, those are no guarantee of a certain amount or a guarantee of funding. Again, we may have to adjust those per pupil amounts as necessary, depending on the number of applications that we receive. We believe that right now we have set those so that we will be able to meet the needs and be able to supply funding based on those tentative per pupil amounts. But again, those are not guaranteed. We do recommend that you budget based on those. And that will allow us to ensure that we are within the limit of the appropriation. And then applicants must be open to consultation with the Kentucky Department of Education. That's going to be important, as we may need to go back and forth a little bit at some point with collecting some documentation from you, asking questions about certain things you want to carry out. We may have to collect some inventory information from you. So it's important for you to be open to consultation with us. It's also important to know these three definitions. We will have staff across the department who are going to help us assess applications when they come in. One of the things we are going to train them on and ensure that they are looking for is to ensure that costs or budgets are reasonable, necessary, and allocable. Reasonable means that something that you put in your budget is not excessive in cost and is based on prudent and sound purchasing practices. To give you an extreme example of that, one time I had a district that was requesting in one of its program applications to purchase one laptop cart at a cost of $10,000. The first thing that my staff and I did was go to Google and search for laptop carts to kind of get an idea of the range of prices. And it turns out that $10,000 is way above what the average would be. So do some research on costs to make sure that your costs are prudent. Look at 2 or 3 sources to ensure that, what you're asking for would be deemed reasonable. Necessary is, that means essential for carrying out a needs-based assistance or carrying out needs-based assistance associated with COVID-19 impacts. Again, we're asking you to make connections between the impacts of COVID-19 and the assistance that you are asking for. And allocable means the cost it fits under one of those allowable activity categories and meets the intent of the EANS program. The intent of the EANS program is really to ensure that non-public schools are able to respond to either prior impacts or future impacts of COVID-19. Our responsibilities really are to communicate with and provide assistance to applicants. So again, right now we have sent out an initial communication with some resources in it. We have set up an EANS page that provides additional assistance information and required forms. And we're providing webinars and have an email box that is set up to provide those particular those applicants with some assistance on specific questions. We have to receive and evaluate applications for quality, consistency with allowed expenditures, reasonableness, and connection to program intent. We have to allocate reimbursements and provide for services. Again, we have to obligate funds within 6 months. And then we have to inventory materials and equipment. So non-consumable materials and equipment do remain the property of KDE. So any services that we provide and administer, technology or other non-consumables, we do retain title to that property. We also must assume title to non-consumable materials and equipment for which a non-public school receives reimbursement or which is purchased for them in the future, whether that's a future reimbursement or a reimbursement for something that was purchased by a non-public school in the past. if you are requesting reimbursement for those things, essentially those things become the property of the Kentucky Department of Education. The thing about that is technology, for example. If we have to take title of technology because you are asking for reimbursement of that, we will allow you to use that technology until either A, it reaches the end of its useful life, or B, you no longer have a need for it. So that's why we have to inventory those types of things in case we need to reclaim those because they're just broken and they don't work, or you decide, hey, we don't have a need for those items anymore. We have to reclaim those items and dispose of those according to regulations. So the application window will open from March 23rd to 26th. We know right now that you should have, or should be able to access on our EANS webpage a hard copy of the application for planning. We will not accept applications beyond that closing date. We are only accepting submissions using the provided SurveyMonkey link. That link is not open yet, but it can be found in our initial communication. And there will be a link on the EANS webpage that you can access that beginning on the 23rd. Again, once received, we have to score those and award assistance within 30 days and then obligate those funds awarded within 6 months. Just want to take a little bit of time to talk about some particularly useful pieces of information. Again, we have created our own KDE EANS website. It is not linked here, but we do have one. The easiest way to get there is to go to education.ky.gov and search for, in the search bar, EANS, and it will be the very first link that comes up in your search. USAID has provided us some guidance and has created their own website with additional information. And again, questions may be sent to the following email box, and that is kpso@education.ky.gov. I serve as the non-public school ombudsman for programs under the Every Student Succeeds Act, and that mailbox is specifically set up for those questions, and we are accepting EANS questions through that mailbox as well. Matthew, Karen, or Thelma, is there anything else at this point?
I would add two things. First, our EANS website, if you go to education.ky.gov, we've also linked that on our COVID response alert that is on the top. There's like a khaki and orange bar at the top of the website. And so there's a link directly to that EANS webpage in that COVID alert box. I also want to just acknowledge the questions in the chat and let you know that we are working on responding to those questions behind the scenes. And that if we're not able to answer them today, we will be releasing a frequently asked questions document in the next day or two after we get through these webinars. And so anything that we're not able to answer today, we will archive and report on very shortly. So we're working on those questions and we'll answer them as soon as we can.
Karen or Thelma, anything else to add at this point?
No, I don't have anything. We're looking at, like Matthew said, we're looking at the questions that are in the chat, and we have some processes within the department that reach outside of our department, as I mentioned earlier. So we'll definitely want to reach out to our finance administration cabinet to see about the vendor request form and all of the details that go along with that. So we will address that question in the FAQ. And any of the inventory questions that you have, we are still working on that process. You know, as a state agency, we are not used to this process with non-public schools. Typically, you know, our LEAs take care of equitable services. So this is a new process for us as well. So we ask your patience as we continue to work through how will be the best way to address the inventory questions. And we will include in the FAQ as well. So thank you.
Thelma, anything else?
No, you covered everything regarding costs.
Okay, Matthew, can you see the application that I pulled up?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I just want to tell everybody that we have posted a new version of the application. It doesn't have any substantive changes, mostly just we found a couple typos in there. So you can download a new version of that from our EANS webpage. The application, again, will be in SurveyMonkey. We've provided you a PDF copy that says for planning purposes only. And you can use this for planning and starting to write your responses at this point. And that way, when the application window opens on the 23rd, you're ready to put your things into the SurveyMonkey platform. Again, we will not be taking responses written on this particular form or a Word version of that, but only through that SurveyMonkey platform. So the application starts out with the cover page and talks about some of the requirements and allowable activities within the program. Again, you'll see this exactly like this within SurveyMonkey. Talks about some of the items that USDE has determined that are not allowable for reimbursement, and then gets into the actual meat and potatoes, starting with contact information, which you will, provide us for, provide us one name of a school representative and some contact information in case we need to make a phone call or send an email about application questions we may have. And then also later on for contacts with information about inventory and things of that nature. We will ask you to upload a certification signature page. We'll ask you to upload again the W-9 and the easy vendor registration application. Get into the parts that are required to be within the application. These assurances are required, so we'll ask whether or not you are a nonprofit school. We talked a little bit about that in the application. Talk about whether or not the school is operating within accordance to state law. That should be a yes for everyone. And the school requesting services was in existence prior to March 13th, 2020. Want to point out that the certification and the assurances are a legally binding document, which means that you are ensuring the accuracy of your information as you submit. So we will ask whether or not the school applying for assistance received payroll protection program loans. Particularly, we want to know if you are going to or have received a loan on or after December 27th of 2020. If you did, that would negate your eligibility at that point. However, a school that requested and received a PPP loan prior to that date is eligible to apply for services. You're going to certify that none of the services or assistance that you are asking for have already been supported or reimbursed or paid for by a PPP loan. And then that you are certifying that you are applying as a non-public school that serves K to 12th grade, that you are specifically not a standalone preschool program. Okay, part C, we're going to get into enrollment and low income data. So question 11, you will give us your total K to 12 enrollment from the 1920 school year, and then you will give us the number or estimated number of students from low income or number of low income students from the 1920 school year as well. 13, we describe some of the data sources that may be used to demonstrate your low income status. So we would ask you to read through those, and in most cases I would say qualification for free and reduced price lunch might be the easiest for most people to gather. We'll ask you to calculate a percentage of those low-income students. And then some additional questions about the PPP program. '18 through the rest of the application really gets into the impacts of COVID-19 on your school, whether that's homeschool or a larger private school. We do ask that you try to make a very strong connection to COVID-19 impacts and the things that you are going to request. And then there's the question about whether or not you received equitable services from an LEA that's a district previously under the first round of the CARES Act. Part D will ask you to describe the types of services and assistance to be reimbursed. From the allowable uses of funds, we ask that each reimbursement is included on a separate line, and we will ask you question 21, how the assistance or service meets the school's need resulting from the impact of COVID-19. Last but not least, we ask you to indicate the anticipated dollar amount for each of the following allowable cost categories. Part D would be if you were, 23 would be if you were asking for services or assistance to be acquired. Again, those are services that, Matthew, I'm correct here, that are that a private school would be asking us to administer for them. Is that correct?
That's correct. So there's two sections. There's reimbursement looking backwards and new services looking forwards.
Right. Describe how the assistance will meet the school needs again. And then we ask you to indicate the anticipated dollar amount for each of the allowable spending categories. Matthew, Thelma, or Karen, did I miss anything in there or something that needs to be touched on a little more?
I would just add that as you think about your planning and you're starting to work on your application, my advice would be to complete the entire application first, get all of your answers, and then you'll copy and paste those into the SurveyMonkey in one sitting. So you cannot log out and back into your SurveyMonkey application. It's not, we didn't have enough time to build an interactive application platform that you may use for another large grant program, because we only have 30 days internally to turn this process around. So it's a regular old SurveyMonkey. So you'll need to complete it start to finish in one setting.
Great point. Karen or Thelma, anything additional that you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so, David. I think that I want to appreciate all of the questions, because there's some really good questions that are coming in that are giving us good directions to go to find additional information for you guys. But no, I don't have anything else to add at this point.
Okay, we have until 11:30. I think this pretty much wraps up what we have today. Should we stay on just a few more minutes in case we receive additional questions through the chat?
David, I think that's good if we can stay on and keep monitoring the chat. Before we let other folks go, though, can you just show the EANS page?
Sure.
So they can see where those application materials are.
Yeah, hold on just a second. I'll bring that up. Matthew, I'm going to try to share my screen here. Just tell me when you can see it.
Yes, I can see.
Okay, so I think if you land on the Kentucky Department of Education's homepage, the easiest thing to do to find that page is to go to the search bar and type in EANS and then just hit enter or go. And the first link that will come up will be the emergency assistance to non-public schools. You'll notice on that page we have just an introduction to the program, similar to what you would have found in the program or in the original communication. We have some external resources linked at the bottom. And then in this sidebar, we have the application for planning, the W-9 tax form, the easy vendor registration, and the signature page, all of those things which will have to be uploaded and or sent to the department prior to application submission. Anything else on this page, Matthew, that you would like to point out?
I would just add that over the next couple of days and weeks, any new information will be posted to this page. So I would encourage you to find this page, bookmark it. We are going to be adding today or tomorrow some more clarification around the process for submitting that W-9 and that easy vendor application early. So that's an optional process. We are encouraging you to submit early, but then you will also submit that in your application one way or the other. So we'll be putting some language later today or tomorrow to clarify that. And then any new language you'll see will be added to this page.
Also on that page at the very bottom is a link directly to that email box. So please feel free to use that email box as much as you want. We are, I'm monitoring that, but am forwarding or consulting with Matthew, Thelma, and Karen quite often on questions. They're starting to come in quite often now. I received yesterday about 10 or 15 questions total. If you don't hear from us, within the first few hours, you may just need to give us a little bit of time. I am checking that regularly And depending on the number of questions that come in, it may take just a little bit of time to get back with you. I would suggest if you do have questions, submit them early. That gives us a better chance to give you a timely response and do a little bit of research if we need to on particular questions.
Hey, David, this is Karen. Can you
Yes.
talk a little bit more about the private preschool eligibility and if it's attached to a K-12 institution? Can you clarify that a little bit? We have a question in the chat on that.
Yeah, sure. So to clarify, standalone preschools are not eligible to apply on their own, but a preschool that is part of a non-public elementary is eligible to receive services. If that preschool is attached to an elementary school, preschool kids should not be counted in your enrollment and should not be counted as part of the low income count for students. However, once that elementary school receives its allocation and is ready to begin implementing services, you know, if you wanted to include, for example, preschool teachers in professional development or provide some technology or other resources to preschool children, that would be allowable if that elementary school chooses to do so. Karen, does that kind of address what they needed to know?
Yep, I believe so. And
Okay.
the person that had asked the question in the chat, if you have additional questions, be sure and put those in so we can get you what the information that you need. Thanks,
Correct.
David.
Yep.
David, there are also several questions about low income data. So we've put the language from the application into the chat. If you would like to see that, that's also on question 13 of the updated application. So you can see the different kinds of data that are available. David, would you like to expand on that at all?
The only other thing I would say, Matthew, I think, is that the U.S. Department of Education guidance gets into that in several questions as well. So it'd be useful to go in and kind of preview those questions also. And then if there are additional specific questions to your situation, let us know in advance so we have an opportunity to address those with you.
We are seeing several questions around cafeteria supplies and furniture, and so we are responding to those. But that seems to be a pretty popular question: is what would those types of expenses be allowable? So,
And I think, you know, Karen, I think they would be, because I
yes.
looked at, you know, CDC guidance yesterday, and they talked about cleaning and sanitation in lunchrooms, social distancing in lunchrooms. We had a question that came up yesterday about could we buy furniture and fixtures to allow for proper social distancing according to CDC guidelines, and the answer to that was yes. So,
Okay, good deal.
yeah, those types of things would be allowable.
And David, we've got a follow-up on the preschool. I've got a question that says, if the preschool qualifies for the CARES money, is this in addition to, or would it exclude them?
Might need some clarification on that particular question.
Okay.
Yeah, I would ask whoever asked that question, if you would send that to the non-public school ombudsman email address, we might need some more details about what specifically you're talking about, because there are probably 8 or 10 different pots of CARES money with different rules. So that sounds like a local question. So we can take that question, and then if that's a question that we feel like can be turned into a more broad question, we'll add it to the FAQ for everyone else to see.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
David, we also have a question about a school being 100% free under the National School Lunch Program. Kind of, like our CEP districts that we have in the public arena. So I think that the question is, do I say I'm 100% or do I say what I was prior to becoming completely fed under school, the National School Lunch Program? I would say you would say what you were prior to being 100%. So this person indicates they were about a 50%. So I would answer that you would give the number that you truly are, even though you participate in that CEP program. David,
Yeah,
Matthew, or Thelma,
I would
anything to
agree
add?
with, yeah, I
Okay.
agree with that, Karen. Let's make sure that one makes it into the FAQs for
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
There may be something in the guidance about that. I don't remember right offhand.
Okay. Thank you. So David, we've got a question. So the money can be used for more than one purpose? And that is, yeah, the answer to that is yes.
Yes.
And this would just need to be indicated in the application, and that's correct.
Yeah.
So the last part is, or should the application only focus on one need? So no, this is to address multiple needs within your school. Would summer programming to address learning loss be allowable for future assistance requests? And that is a yes.
Yes.
And then we've got a question regarding, the state taking title to devices that have been previously purchased. So again, we are having those conversations, but David, correct me if I'm wrong, but the act does say that if we reimburse a non-public school back to March 13th of 2020 for any equipment, computer, anything computers or any type of things that they've purchased, COVID related, that they would become property of the state. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay.
That does not mean we would collect those at the end of the year and they would have use of those again through the end of their useful life or until they are no longer needed.
We've got one that says hiring of additional staff, instructional aides to address learning loss. And could you make a suggestion, example of evidence to support learning loss?
Think evidence to support learning loss could come from, multiple sources, including benchmark assessments, could come from, I'm going to go back to the old Title I verbiage, which says you have to address needs based on multiple educational criteria. So it could come from grades, assessments, teacher recommendations, things of that nature to support a need for learning loss. And yeah, hiring additional staff to address learning loss, whether that's through before and after school interventions, through intersession school extension in the summer, or even carrying forward into the next school year. Hiring additional staff would be an allowable way to combat learning loss. Including technology in online learning platforms to address that as well.
More questions about HVAC systems. We cannot reimburse for an HVAC system that was installed in the past, but we can if you have ventilation needs that are not being met with your current system. So, and I think Matthew had addressed that earlier. We had another question on that. Also, just David, we just kind of wanted to maybe talk a little bit more about the question about do I have to direct my application towards one thing, or can I ask for multiple things? Can you talk a little bit around the per pupil amount? I mean, yeah, there's $40 million sitting there, but you may request more than what you're able to get based on how many applications and all that we receive. Can you talk a little bit more about that for us?
Yeah, I think number one is to figure out how much your student populations will support allocation wise. I guess you could go beyond that. I would caution you to maybe think about prioritizing things, because if we cannot meet that total allocation for your schools, you're going to have to make some cuts somewhere. So in your planning, I would really try to stick very, very closely to those per pupil amounts and what they would garner for your schools. Just so I think Karen, and you might disagree with that, but I think if we've got people asking for amounts and services that go well beyond what their per pupil would support, it's gonna cause us maybe to have to go back and do some back and forth, and that's going to kind of slow down our processes for awarding. I don't know. Any additional thoughts on that, Karen?
No, David, I agree. I think prioritizing on the applicant's part is very, very important. Of course, remembering those key components of, this has to be directly related to COVID-19. And I believe there's a slide that specifically states those three pieces. It needs to be, it needs to be allowable, and it needs to be allocable. So refer to that when making your plan. And you have 27 days, I believe it is, to get this ready and to really think about what the needs are of your organization. So prioritization is very important. We don't want to, we don't want to not fund things that are important to schools. However, we do have a limited dollar amount. So yes, I would agree with what you said, David. So we've got another question, David. Can reimbursement be for hiring of subs to cover for teachers who were allowed to teach from home due to health issues?
Karen, that one might need some additional
Okay.
explanation. So can
Okay.
we make sure that one gets on our FAQs?
Yep, absolutely.
One thing I would say about that question is you've also got that PPP loan factored into this. So if you received a PPP loan before that December 27th date, then you could not have this money to reimburse. But if you received that PPP loan moving forward after the December 27 date, well, you have to assure that you won't apply for another PPP loan. So if you got a PPP loan in the past and you used that money to pay for subs, then you cannot apply for reimbursement of subs in this program. And then if you apply for this program, you're going to assure to us that you're not going to also apply for a new PPP loan moving forward. So when you're thinking about hiring, you need to think about that PPP loan. I would advise you that if staff is all that you want out of this money, then you need to probably compare what you're going to get from this loan to what you could get in a PPP loan, because that PPP loan might actually be a larger amount of money for you if you are only seeking staff at this time.
So David, we've got another question. So the amount we receive is based upon enrollment during the 1920 school year, plus the number of students who qualified for free and reduced lunch during that same school year.
That is correct. The reason for that is the school had to be in existence prior to March 13th, 2020. So we are asking for numbers really going back to that particular school year.
And to clarify, it's not necessarily students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. It's low income students. So if you're one of those 100% free and reduced lunch schools, you're not going to put 100% unless every single one of your students would have qualified for free and reduced lunch without the federal waiver. So really look on question 13 on the new application. So I think it's question maybe 11 on the prior application. We had to kind of move some things. But it's question 13 on the most current one. We list all of the acceptable data points to determine what it means to be a low income student. So when you're talking about this, I would encourage you to always say low income, not free and reduced lunch. I think that will help in your planning. So you're always thinking about the right funds.
Yes.
And I do see a question about the PPP loans and it prior to December 27th and it's used for subs. So we didn't manage that PPP loan at KDE. So I can't really speak to that, but what I can say is that if you used PPP loan money to fund an activity prior to December 27th, you may not be reimbursed for that activity with the EANS dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a question. If we need to purchase technology for the current school year because we still do not have adequate devices, does our purchase have to be done through a specific vendor or can we choose the vendor?
Karen, do you want to
Yeah.
address?
So, yeah, if we being the state, if we make the purchase for you, we would have to follow all of our state model procurement laws. So if you say to us, I need 10 computers, then we would procure those computers through vendors that we would look first to see who we have on state master agreement. So I don't want to say overwhelmingly that it would be the state choosing the vendor. I think there may be situations where that's different, but we would just have to talk through those on a case by case basis. But if we procure the purchase and the equipment for you, then yes, it would have to follow our procurement laws, and we would look at vendors on state master agreement first.
Karen, if they choose to ask for reimbursement for that, though, and make the purchase on their own, they could choose any vendor.
That's correct. That's
What?
correct. Yes.
Yeah.
But prior to doing that, we would need to have, that conversation back and forth with KDE and the entity to say, this is what I'm going to do and make sure that it is allowable under these dollars to be reimbursed. We would not want to see a school expend money in anticipation of it being an allowable reimbursement and then it not fit that category and they be out those funds and not be eligible for reimbursement. So I think that's something that we had been talking about as well, that process of that pre-approval kind of process.
Yeah, so Karen, really, they should be waiting on approval of their expenditures within their application, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is an accounting question. Items purchased under or reimbursed through EANS would then belong to the state, So they would no longer be reflected on or depreciated as assets of our school. So yes, we would take title and they would be inventoried under the state.
I'm sorry, I cannot hear you. Yes.
It seems like we've got someone that's not muted, then we can hear another conversation. So if you're not muted, if you don't mind to do that.
That would be fine.
Karen, there's another question in there
Mhm.
that says, would you all then have to give us tech quotes before we apply? Might be more accurate that way.
I'm meeting before your application is actually submitted. I don't know. I have to think about that. Let me think about that and talk with my procurement staff and see what, but I don't think so. David, what do you think? Or Thelma?
I don't think we would need to give them quotes. I think they can, based on their pricing, however they normally do their pricing, they should base their budgets on that.
Yeah, and I think if they potentially use that reimbursement method instead of asking the state to administer, they can do all the research up front, wait for that approval before doing any purchasing. And once we say, yeah, it's okay, and give them the green light, they could do the ordering, correct?
Yes.
I mean, essentially, if they ask for that reimbursement, they're going to process the order themselves.
That's correct. Yes. So once they say to us, we're gonna buy these 10 computers, and we know that is an allowable cost, and we say okay, then they make the purchase, and then we reimburse them back for the purchase.
And I just think
Correct.
for this particular program that offers private schools a lot of flexibility that they would not have under typical federal programs. So I think the planning could happen up front on the applicant's end, without having to ask us to administer those services for you. I think really it just cuts out the middleman for this program.
So we've got more questions. I had to purchase many devices. We must not be being clear. I had to purchase many devices before the beginning of this school year. These then should not be submitted. So those would be eligible for reimbursement, correct, David?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes.
I guess the determining factor would be whether or not you want to relinquish title to those items to the state.
Correct. And there is that slide that does say what is not eligible for reimbursement. So we're back to that prior HVAC system. That would not be eligible for reimbursement. So make sure you refer to that slide for the things that are not eligible.
Right.
Let's see, we're
Let
getting,
Karen, if I can jump in. So
yes,
let's talk
please.
about reimbursement for a second. So
Okay.
there's reimbursement in two lenses. So there's reimbursement on the application, which is I bought this stuff earlier in the school year. I'm asking for you to pay me back for the stuff that I bought. That's the reimbursement section of your application. Then the second part of your application is this is stuff I still need to buy. One of the processes that may be available as we move forward is that you buy the stuff and then we reimburse you for the stuff that you buy moving forward. So let's talk about computers. If I bought computers in August for my kids and I'm going to ask for reimbursement for those items, that's going to go in my reimbursement section of my application. I've already bought it. I want money back for what I've already bought. That's my reimbursement section. If I know that I still need 25 more computers, then I'm going to put that in my moving forward services requested, new services requested section. When it's time to actually buy those new computers, then we can buy those for you and we'll maintain title. We'll send those to you through our procurement processes. Or you will be able to purchase those computers, and then you'll send us the invoice and we'll reimburse that purchase. So we're using reimbursement. That's the confusion, I think. We've got reimbursement under the program, which is stuff that we already bought. That's reimbursement under the program. And then we have procedural reimbursement for new things moving forward. So I hope that provides a little bit of clarity.
And I think, Matthew, for the reimbursement moving forward, if that's going in the second part, they could provide clarification in the narrative that says we are requesting reimbursement for purchases moving forward as follows, right?
Yeah, I think that's great. I think you're just going to tell us in the narrative of that moving forward section, you're just going to tell us what you want to do. So let's say that you have 100 computers in your school. They're all under some kind of service contract. They're through a special vendor, and you want to add 20 computers to your existing situation because it's under a service contract or it's under a certain network component or there's an extra thing that they do for you. Then that would be something that you're going to ask for in your stuff moving forward section. And then because we couldn't necessarily buy that for you because it's an extension of your contract, you're going to pay for that, send us the invoice, and we're going to reimburse that for you. Now, depending on your school situation, that might not be an option. You might not have $25,000 liquid that you can go ahead and buy and then wait for reimbursement. So that would be a situation where then you would contact us and we would purchase it for you. We couldn't cut you a $25,000 check and then you buy the stuff.
Yeah, so I think if they clarify whether or not they are looking for reimbursement moving forward or they want us to administer services moving forward, they need to be specific about that particular point.
There's one new question here about the application. So you have 3 days to actually turn your materials in. That starts on March 23rd. You're going to send us through the SurveyMonkey your signed certification page, your W-9, and your easy vendor form. All of those are available for download on our EANS webpage.
Yes.
You're also then going to fill out the SurveyMonkey and submit that. So that's all the stuff you're going to do on the 23rd. To expedite the process, you can go ahead and submit your W-9 and your easy vendor form early. And I think Karen has just put that email address in the chat box. We'll also post that email address to our EANS page probably today or first thing in the morning. So you can go ahead and submit that stuff early, and that's just going to expedite the process. So you're going to get access to your money a little faster if you do that. You have to submit it on the 23rd, one way or the other. So all 3 documents have to be uploaded to SurveyMonkey no matter what, but you can go ahead and submit the W-9 and the easy vendor form early so that you can expedite your process and get your money a little bit faster. And David, it seems like our questions are starting to come to a halt here. So if you want to wrap us up and then we can keep collecting questions and we'll issue that FAQ in the next couple of days.
Okay, yeah, I just want to say thank you for everybody for joining, to everybody for joining. Again, if you have additional questions, you can submit those through the KPSO mailbox that we've talked about. Find that link on the EANS webpage. And again, we are trying to process those questions as quickly as we can. Again, those questions can be anything from the general to the very specific about your particular situation. Other than that, Matthew, Karen, or Thelma, anything else before we wrap it up?
Nothing for me.
Nope, nothing for me.
All right, thank you all very much. We're going to stop the recording. And again, if you have questions, please feel free to get in touch with us. Thank you all. Everybody have a great day.